punch. It pressed against our flimsy kayak. I made eye contact with West, my mouth open, his jaw aghast too, and we were both certain in that moment we were going to be crushed to death. It didn't even notice us, it just closed like we weren't there. But by a miracle, instead of crushing us to death, it pinched the bottom of our kayak and lifted us up into the air. Eileen and I then grabbed onto the ice and pulled into the water, and we slipped back into the water. But the danger wasn't over. The space was disappearing, and now West and Jeff had been hit. So the nose of their kayak was now up on the ice, but the back was still in the water, with Jeff sitting in it, slowly being rotated into the freezing ocean. Now Jeff is the most chilled out Texan man you'll ever meet. And as he was being slowly lowered into his icy death, he shouted, "Oh, yo, Mark, I'm going to need some help here real quick." So I jumped out of the kayak and got onto the ice and pulled Eileen's and my kayak onto the ice with Eileen still sitting in it. Then I turned to West and Jeff and I grabbed onto the front of their kayak, and with all of my might, I pulled it forward. And then we stood there, and like cement, it just closed in around us. What seconds before had been like crazy melee now seemed to be completely static. Nowhere for us to go but stand and wait. Eventually, and I don't know how long that eventually was, honestly it could have been 15 minutes or it could have been 2 hours. Eventually space began to appear again. We made a snap decision to get back in the water so we can get back to land quickly. And we weaved and dodged until finally we made it to the front of the ice pack. We pulled our kayaks over the one final piece of ice, got back into them, and began to paddle to shore. And now really salvation was at hand. We're just 200-300 meters away from shore, no ice between it. We were already thinking, what are you going to do there? Oh, I've been saving a Mars bar for this moment, celebrating. And then I saw 2 sheep. I thought, oh, there's sheep in the Arctic. And I thought, oh, look, ever see sheep? We're thinking, is this like a climate change thing, or the Inuit diversifying because the whales are disappearing? I definitely see sheep. And then we saw a much bigger sheep. And we realized it wasn't a sheep at all. What are the chances, after 17 hours now, that the 1 inch of land we can make it to has a polar bear and the 2 cubs? So we turn left, we kayak for another painstaking hour till we finally make it to a beautiful, beautiful camp spot. We do the only sensible thing we can, and we have a cup of tea. We've done it. We've done the crux of the expedition. It is easier from here on out. Except looking out from our little campsite at all of the ice still moving into the area, it doesn't feel like it's going to get easier. In fact, it feels like we're in the worst position we've been in yet. We've already seen how long we can be trapped on shore, 15 days. We can't lose another 15 and expect to do this. Failure was a real possibility. And those familiar feelings that I had of failure, patheticness, worthlessness began to build up once again. But I look back on that one day. I'd seen narwhal, sea ice, sunset, moon rises that blew my mind, which surpassed anything I'd ever seen before. I realized the success of an adventure didn't lie in the arbitrary finish point, a world record, a world first. It lay in those experiences. The inherent joy of the adventure was the success. And that is how I would go forward measuring the success of this endeavor, not by just one extrinsic value. You know, now I go around the world and I give talks to companies and corporates about resilience. And I always get the question, well, surely now this makes you like objectively less resilient, more likely to give up on your goal because you're happy with the experience instead of the goal. But ironically, this makes you far more resilient. Putting the inherent joy of the process over the outcome makes you more likely to stick to the process. Who's more likely to run a 4-hour marathon? Somebody who wishes they'd run a 4-hour marathon, or somebody who enjoys running? You know, now whenever I experience a setback, whenever I'm dealing with adversity, whenever I'm procrastinating, even on a goal that I think I want to achieve, I used to think, well, I need something bigger to motivate me. I need a bigger world record. What's my world record? I no longer do that. I now think about that polar bear. And in my old mindset, I would have said, that's another obstacle, something stopping us from landing, something between us and our goal. And now I realize that seeing a polar bear in the wild from such an intimate position was a privilege. That was the goal. I no longer ask what was my world record. I now ask, what is my polar bear?